When you think of famous haunted places in England, which ones come to mind? The Tower of London, maybe, or Hampton Court Palace. These places have their share of ghost stories, but nowhere in England is more haunted than the Queen Mary. And that's why, in today's video, we're going to be taking a trip aboard the haunted Queen Mary. The Queen Mary was built in 1864 and started running routes between Southampton and New York. It was built to be the largest and fastest ocean liner afloat, and for a time it was. But that title was taken away from her by her sister ship, the Titanic, just 2 years later. The Queen Mary was an instant success and continued to be a popular ship for many decades. But its life as a luxury liner came to a halt in 1935 when it was converted into a troop transport ship and served in both World War II and the Korean War. After being decommissioned, it was put up for sale and eventually became a museum permanently docked in Long Beach, California. So now that we know where the ship is today, let's go back in time and see some of the most famous hauntings aboard the ship. The first story takes us back to the very beginning of the ship's life when it was still under construction. Back then, shipyard workers had a strange phenomenon they couldn't explain. Every night at around midnight, the clock tower on board the ship would chime, and then an apparition of a man would appear on the top of the clock tower. He would stand there and watch the workers as they completed work on the ship. Sometimes he even interacted with them, shaking hands and talking about his experiences at sea. They could never figure out who the ghost was, so they asked a medium to come aboard the ship and communicate with him. The medium told them that this ghost was Captain James Watt, one of the first captains of the ship, who tragically died after being crushed by a falling mast while in port. Now, every night at midnight, his ghost comes back to check on the progress of the ship that he loved so much. Our next haunting comes from John G. Barrett, the ship's first purser. Mr. Barrett was responsible for handling all the financial transactions on board the ship. He made sure the guests paid their bills on time and dealt with any issues that they had. In 1902, he accidentally overcharged a guest by $20. When the man went to pay his bill, Barrett accidentally added an extra zero onto the bill. The guest, outraged by what he felt was an attempt to steal from him, threw his money at Mr. Barrett and stormed off the ship. A few days later, Mr. Barrett was found dead in his room with a belt wrapped around his neck. While it was ruled a suicide, many crew members believe he was actually murdered by the vengeful guest. Since then, people have reported seeing the ghost of Mr. Barrett wandering the ship looking for the man who ended his life. Some say they've even heard his footsteps coming down the hallway towards them, and then they turn the corner and no one's ever there. Moving on, we have the ghost of a young couple that died aboard the ship. This couple was madly in love and decided to get married on board the ship during its maiden voyage. But tragedy struck when both of them came down with a mysterious illness shortly after the wedding. Within days, they were both dead. Some say the ghost of the newlyweds can still be seen wandering the ship, holding hands, and searching for the source of the illness that took their lives. Many also claim to have heard their voices echoing through the halls at night, singing songs and reciting their vows to each other. But not all ghosts aboard the ship are friendly. One of the most terrifying hauntings on board the ship belongs to the ghost of a little girl named Dorothy. She was a passenger aboard the ship along with her mother and father, but one night, while her parents were asleep, she snuck out of their cabin and wandered onto the deck. She was never seen again, and her body has never been recovered. To this day, people report hearing the sound of children's footsteps running through the corridors, as well as seeing the ghost of Dorothy standing at the edge of the ship as if waiting for something. Now, let's move on to another sad ghost, Helen Bishop. Helen Bishop was a second-class passenger aboard the ship when it hit an iceberg and sank. There were only 2 lifeboats available for passengers, so many had to stay on the ship until help arrived. Tragically, the captain didn't realize the next morning that the lifeboats were filled with women and children. He thought they were filled with men. So when he organized the remaining passengers into groups of 8, he left Helen and several other women behind. They were left to fend for themselves, and sadly, none of them survived. Helen's ghost is said to wander the ship looking for the captain who condemned her to death. Next, we have a ghost that no one has ever been able to identify. People call her the Lady in White because she's always seen wearing white clothing. She's most often seen in the first-class dining room, sitting at one of the tables and eating. Others have seen her walking the promenade deck, looking out at the ocean. Many have tried to approach her and speak to her, but she seems to vanish before anyone can get close enough to identify herself. One of the most famous hauntings on the ship belongs to B. Presidentin, a wealthy businessman who was traveling on the ship when it sank. He was in his cabin when the ship struck the iceberg, and he knew there was no escape. Instead of boarding one of the lifeboats, he packed a suitcase with valuables and waited for the ship to sink. That way, he could retrieve the items from his cabin. But sadly, his body was never recovered, and neither were his valuables. People have reported seeing the ghost of Mr. President walking the decks at night, still carrying his suitcase. Another ghost that haunts the Queen Mary is that of a sailor who was killed in an accident. One day he was working on the ship's rigging when he was struck by a rope and killed instantly. His body was never recovered, but his ghost is said to roam the decks at night, looking for the person responsible for his death. Let's move on to the ghost of Captain Edward Smith. He was the captain of the ship when it sank, and he went down with the ship. Many people believe that he could have saved many of the passengers and crew, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to stay on the ship and die with it. His ghost is said to haunt the bridge where he spent his final moments alive. If you've watched our videos for a while, then you know we love stories about haunted dolls. Well, the Queen Mary has a haunted doll that is unlike any other. Her name is Margaret, and she's a ventriloquist dummy. For decades, she was displayed in a museum, but she was recently moved to a new location. No one knows why this was done, but many believe it's because she was cursed. People who worked at the museum reported strange things happening around Margaret, and they believe that she may have been possessed by the spirit of a young girl who died on the ship. While those are some of the scariest stories of ghosts on the ship, the last one might just take the cake. It's a ghost that goes by many names, including the Black Gentleman, the Shadow Man, and Old Man. He's the ghost of a man who was killed on the ship during World War II. He was a sailor who was killed by a bomb, and his body was never recovered. Some say he was killed by friendly fire, while others say he was killed by an enemy bomb. But no one knows for sure. The ghost is said to haunt the engine room where he was killed. People have reported hearing the sound of heavy footsteps in the engine room, as well as seeing the shadow of a man walking through the halls. Some have even seen the ghost of the man standing at the entrance to the engine room as if guarding it. Did any of these stories scare you? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more great videos. We'll see you next time. Bye.